We communicate who we are through clothing. It is fundamentally a part of what we wish to communicate about ourselves.
We used to have a system, a fashion system. That has absolutely nothing to do with the fashion industry today. It has been reinvented.
It's based on materialism. The problem is that comes at a really high price.
Garment factory collapsed, killing more than 1,000.
Clashes between clothes factory workers and riot police in Cambodia.
Last November, 112 people were killed in another major factory fire. 30,000 Chinese workers have been on strike.
Garment workers in Bangladesh will paying the price for cheap clothing.
Well, the promise of globalization was that it was going to be a win-win, that consumers in the rich world would get cheaper goods and people in the poorer parts of the world would get jobs, and that those jobs would give them an opportunity to work their way out of poverty.
This enormous, rapacious industry that is generating so much profit, why is it that it is unable to support millions of its workers properly?
The actual business model is completely unsustainable. Unless you change that model, you can't change anything.
When everything is concentrated on making profits, what you see is that human rights, the environment, workers' rights get lost.
My God, we can do better than this.
And that, of course, is the amazing movie True Cost. And if you have not watched that film, I really encourage you to do so. My name is Sara Vaughan. I'm an innovator and creator of Brands with Purpose. I'm also the Global Chief Purpose and Sustainability Advisor to Marie Claire that reaches 91 million women and girls around the world. And I wish to change this model. Let me give you a further insight into it. Americans buy an average of 64 items of clothing per year, more than one piece of clothing a week. Brits amass 32,951 pounds of unworn clothing in a lifetime. Every second, the equivalent of one garbage truck of textiles is landfilled or burned. Every second, someone is working in appalling conditions. And that's just the fashion industry. The story is the same across the consumer goods sector, whether it's electronics, food, or beauty products. The result of this addiction to stuff is that we are devouring the planet's resources at a rate 1.7 times faster than it can regenerate, which is having a devastating impact on the planet, our fellow humans, and all life on Earth. For this session, I've invited an amazing lineup of panelists to explore how we got here in the first place and what businesses and individuals need to do to take action and avert climate disaster. So, my first question to you, Zanaji, is tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Zanaji Artis. I use he, him pronouns. I am one of the founders and a co-executive director and the policy director of 0 Hour, which is a global youth-led climate justice organization based in the US with chapters around the world. And what we do is we mobilize for climate policy and climate justice education. And our platform names 4 root causes of climate change, which are patriarchy, capitalism, colonialism, and racism. And so we've been doing education work around that. And I am also a co-author of a kid's book about climate change which was recently published this past year. And I am here as a representative of 0 Hour and also of Global Choices, which is a women-led intergenerational organization calling for action in the Arctic and in Antarctic, and I'll be traveling with them to Antarctica this coming March.
Amazing. And Josephine.
Yes, so my name's Josephine Phillips, and I am really passionate about sustainable fashion. I've created a fashion tech startup which is working to slow down consumption by making clothing alterations and repairs mainstream. That's the aim. And we do that with our app, which has sort of been dubbed the Deliveroo of clothing alterations and repairs, because you can just go on, book what you need done. One of our cyclists collects it and brings it back to you a few days later. And what we're really believing is that if you look after your clothes, you tailor them to you, you have ownership over them, you'll love them for so much longer. And equally, repairing should be something that is central to what we do. But a lot of young people don't know how to sew, so we're allowing them to have it at their fingertips by sort of bringing it to your phones.
Yeah. I'm one of those people, and I'm wearing my much mended jeans, so hopefully they'll stay together tonight. And then over to Tyrone.
Hi everyone, my name is Tyrone Scott. I'm a social change consultant for the Social Change Agency. So that work requires me to work with community groups, organizations, NGOs to help them create a really impactful social change. This can be through helping with movement building, with network building, with organizing and through campaign strategy. One of the things we're working on at the moment is with a number of UK climate groups across the UK on behalf of the National Lottery, looking to help bridge the gaps within the UK climate movement, help map out where those gaps are within the UK climate movement, and see where those gaps can be filled. And aside from that, I'm also a climate activist and campaigner. I've featured in and contributed in many articles about the climate crisis. I have ran for political office for the Green Party in 2019 in the general election. I'll be running for local politics next year. I'm always looking to champion youth voices. I was the campaigns and communications officer for the Young Greens of England and Wales for 18 months up until last year. And I'm also have a delegate's pass for this week with the Federation of Young European Greens. So yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Pretty impressive, right? And then Joe.
Goodness, I don't know what to say apart from the fact that I'm Glaswegian. My name is Jo Chidley, and I'm the co-founder of Beauty Kitchen and a reusable packaging system called Re. I set up my business in 2014. We're a female-led business. We're one of the highest scoring B Corps in the world ever. And we are Cradle to Cradle certified as well. We've certified all of our 90 products through Cradle to Cradle certification, which basically designs products for the circular economy. And the way that we've done that is through a reusable packaging system, not just for personal care, but actually for any consumer products. So Beauty Kitchen was the first customer, if you like, of Re. And Unilever have been the second customer, and we announced Elemis as the third customer. Now, they're big corporate organisations that don't necessarily have the same ethics or sustainability aspects that we have at Beauty Kitchen, but my big driver really is to assimilate from within, and the way to do that is through their linear business.
Thank you, Joe. And Josephine, tell me, when did you first realise that overconsumption was a problem?
I don't know how many people can relate to it, but I think I made sort of my change into sustainable fashion in probably my first year of uni, so that was about 4 or 5 years ago now. And I think it came from when I moved out, and you have to face everything that you own. And I think that, for me, was the moment where I saw that I had so many clothes that I did not wear, that I did not know about, that sat at the back of my wardrobe. And the only clothes that I knew about were the ones that I'd bought in the last month or 2 months, because you buy them and you love them and you wear them, you forget about them, you buy new ones and you want to wear those ones. And I think I just had accumulated all this stuff. And when I went to uni, I had to pack it all up. And my mum was literally like, you're not leaving anything here, like, take it all with you. And I was just like, there's no space because I have so much stuff. And then I sort of started this process of figuring out, why is it like this? And I realized that I was buying stuff. I was that person buying stuff every week or every couple of weeks. I'm a recovered fast fashion addict or hypocrite or whatever you call it. And I think for me, that was the change, and that was the moment where I sort of was like, something's wrong, the system's wrong, and I'm a product of that system.
Yeah. Thank you. And Tyrone, when did you first realise overconsumption was a problem?
I think Probably the first time I really thought about maybe conscious consumption, funnily enough, was whilst I was working at McDonald's, which was a good time ago. But as a 16-year-old who needs a part-time job, it's relatively common occurrence to, start work at McDonald's. And during that time, especially towards the end, and maybe in my ignorance at the time, I think to myself, why is it so busy here? Why are so many people coming to McDonald's for what I see as, pretty poor food, but it's packed out constantly all the time? And almost becoming a little bit judgmental with that thought process, and again, in thinking around the consumer. But it's where the consumer has essentially been led. When you think about social and economically, it's convenience food, and it's cheap convenience food, and it's a relatively privileged position for me to then judge those who are seeking that convenience food when that is what is the available option laid out in front of them. And that thought sort of progressed further from just the fast food industry. If I look at a similar story around to when the lockdown first ended, or one of the lockdowns first ended, well, one of the lockdowns, I get confused now, but when one of the lockdown ended earlier this year, and there was a lot of mockery online and on Twitter around the swathes of people queuing up outside Primark for that first day that it opened around 7 a.m. And again, it's very easy to say, well, why are these people so driven to consume and also consume unethical clothing sources such as Primark? We know how their factories work. However, again, socioeconomically, that is where they are driven. It's very classist and it's very privileged to judge those who are seeking that convenience consumerism, essentially. And we have to be careful, I think, of really piling it on the consumer in these instances and looking at why they're driven to go to these cheaper options, which whilst we know are very unethical, if that's the only option available to you, we can't then judge and say you should be following other practices. So yeah, probably working at McDonald's and me being a bit judgmental initially led me to start to think about that in more detail.
And Joe, how about you? Was it a kind of road to Damascus kind of overconsumption moment?
So I think it was more, it sort of creeped up on me, if I'm honest. So in terms of my background, when I was growing up, we didn't have the facility to buy new, whether that was from Primark or anywhere else. So everything was generally either hand-downs or second-hand. And it's not until you then get your own job and your own disposable income that you probably glut out, which is probably what I did, really. I've never really been one for fast fashion, if I'm honest. But what I don't really like is I don't really understand why you would make a beautiful product, even if that beautiful product is in plastic. Yeah, you would then sell that to someone, yeah, and then most of that, i.e. the packaging, is then dumped. That just doesn't make commercial sense to me. It doesn't make sense on any level. And the challenge that I find with that is that we're all complicit in this. And that's coming back to your point. We need to be really, you need to encourage not just a handful of people to do this perfectly. We all need to be doing it imperfectly and share it. It doesn't matter where you're from. I think that's what's really key and important.
Thank you, Joe. And Zanaji?
Yeah, I think that something we're highlighting right now is how much of a systems problem this is. Yeah. And I really didn't understand that for a long time. And just think about if you were using an iPhone or any smartphone right now, it might blow your mind to imagine that it's actually using the same amount of energy as a refrigerator in 24 hours of a refrigerator to charge your phone each night. And that is wild to me, that we're using so much energy for these devices, our little computers in our pockets, and not really thinking about it. And we're able to plug it into the wall. We're able to draw water whenever we want to in the West, in many places around the world. And we don't think about it. And so I started to think about overconsumption a lot and just understanding how much we use energy. And specifically, I'm from the US, and people in the US use so much more energy than anywhere else in the world. And I was just in Amsterdam for my layover to here, and seeing how small everyone's cars are. Like in the US, everyone's got their big pickup trucks and their SUVs and their diesel and all of this. And to some extent, there are choices that can be made, of course. We can buy electric vehicles. We can opt for, buying into renewable energy. But for a lot of people, I mean, the grid itself is powered by fossil fuels. And so our consumption is reliant on a system that relies on spending more emissions. And so we really do have to think about it as a systems problem.
We do indeed. And guys and girls in the bar, if you could just keep it down a little bit, that would be great, because it's a little bit tough to talk over you. Thank you. I know there's a bit of overconsumption going on up there. So, like, how have we got ourselves into this situation? Tyrone?
Yeah, I mean, how we've got here, I think it's simple as just one word, it's profit. You know, we live in a world in which profit is the driver in everything that we do, and it might not be individually, but as companies, corporations, that is how you survive and that's how you live, is by creating profit. And that relentless search of profit is eventually going to cause issues, you know. So there's many solutions around clothing, for example. We're not really taught how to reuse, how to repair, how to redistribute clothing, because nobody benefits, everyone benefits, nobody profits from that. So that's not going to be driven as a solution, because if everybody was self-sufficient in those means and understand how to reuse in the community way, then who's making money? The corporations are no longer making money, so that's not going to be pushed. It's not just within clothing, it's through everything. And you know, there's the thing with, you know, with capitalism, it really has two fatal flaws in which it relentlessly destroys nature and it widens inequality amongst humans. And you can see that in where the world has got to today. We have relentlessly destroyed our nature and we've widened that inequality amongst humans, but we've widened that inequality in places that we right now may not be able to see. You know, the global north has been the driver for capitalism and driver for consumerism, but the impacts of that consumerism and that drive for capitalism profit is felt within the global south. And that's why when we talk about, you know, climate change, climate crisis and climate solutions, we really have to talk about restorative justice and reparatory justice when we speak about these things, because that driver for profit at the bottom line has left those in the global south who've not seen the benefits of that profit. They've not reaped the rewards from that profit, but those ones who are suffering the everyday consequences right now of climate change, of the climate crisis, and also just other unethical practices when it comes to our relentless, you know, consumerism, whether it's the poor working practices across factories and everything else. So for me, the bottom line is profit. Our relentless search for profit, which is generally the system in which we live, is how we've got to this point.
And I'd also say that there's never enough profit. Like, these companies are billion-dollar companies, but every year they have to grow. I mean, that's the whole point of it. Even when you've IPO, you have to grow. So if you have to grow every year, people need to consume more every year, so they need to push more consumption every year. And that goes on for the rest of time. Like, that's how it works. You don't want to have a down year. You don't want the company to go like this. So ultimately, that's why they're pushing in terms of psychology and like marketing and making you feel bad about not having it, or whether that's Instagram and the shopping button. It's all about growing a capitalist corporation, and therefore it pushes everything else down.
Yeah, I mean, it's wildly unsustainable, isn't it, the current model? Sanaji, would you like to add? I know you're gagging to say something about this.
Yes, I am. So I think that we also see this a lot in politics with the influence of profit. And especially here in the US, we're right now working on our climate bill. That is probably our one chance this decade to actually get it right. And Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia is profiting massively. His family owns coal companies in West Virginia, and yet he's blocking this bill. Why? Because of profit. And we're seeing it at COP26, where breaking news just from today that oil companies have the biggest delegation here. It's so wrong. And people are organizing against this, but the fact is that people in positions of power are listening to people who are profiting, or they're profiting themselves and investing in the market and owning companies themselves who are profiting off of fossil fuels and environmental destruction. And to what end? And we are growing towards something abstract. There is no growth that is leading to something. We're leading to a wall, and we're going to crash into it if we don't take action now.
Yes, I mean, the sixth mass extinction isn't really a kind of profitable situation for anyone, is it really? Jo, you wanted to dive in there.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, we know that everything is interlinked. So we're interlinked with nature, we're interlinked with governments, we're interlinked with the financial system, and everything needs to be rewired. It needs to be rethought through. So if you're a business that works with a circular business model, and we could get into the debate, but it's not for today, about whether circular business models are as sustainable as they can be, but let's just say for the moment that they are more sustainable than a linear economy mode, yeah? All we're looking for is a level playing field. So I have reusable packaging, and from an accounting system, it is not seen as an asset. So I sell a product to Tyrone. Tyrone uses the shampoo in it. He then gives me that packaging back and gets his money back for the packaging. Yeah, but that piece of packaging is not seen as an asset. So I'm competing against a 10 pence, piece of plastic packaging that is then dumped and has environmental impact, rather than doing a circular business model. All I'm asking for is, I don't mind competition within business, I just want a level playing field. And at the moment, it isn't.
And of course, the plastics industry is controlled by the petroleum industry. But yes. So, I think it's important to spell out, just in case anybody is under any illusions that this isn't important. Why is it so important to use the Earth's resources, more diligently? I mean, let's spell it out. Josephine, would you like to start?
I was going to say Tyrone to start. I think, I mean, like you sort of said, the question is somewhat self-explanatory in the sense of it's every part of our consumption has not been created in a way that is sustainable in its most basic form of the word, like sustainable as in can be sustained and everything is fine. And I think that by realizing that it's finite, I think that's the thing, is like us talking about the never-ending, like trying to chase growth, and it's abstract. Everything that we're going for is like endless apart from resources. They're finite. And I think that concept of something being finite, I even think that the fossil fuel companies, there will be a time when there's no oil. And I understand that actually we could keep going for decades and decades and decades going for oil. But I don't think there's this concept that actually it's limited. And it's just this concept of like trying to go for indefinite growth that is so toxic, that leads to overconsumption, that leads to consumerism. And I think realizing that we have to, and learning, like you said, from people on the front lines in the communities, in indigenous communities, that things that need to be regenerative and that they are finite is really important.
Yeah. Surely. Tyrone.
I mean, very much agree with all of that. I think there's many reasons, but I think justice is one of the real driving reasons for me. I think it's become really more evident over the last few years how interlinked, seeking that climate justice is with restorative justice, with refugee justice, with racial justice. You really can't underlie how much the impact of our actions here in the West or in the global North, however you wanted to talk about it, has had that destructive and really destructive impact right now and presently within the global South. And sometimes we talk about colonialism. We all know it's awful, but colonialism is a thing of the past. Colonialism is not something that continues, but colonialism is absolutely continuing right now. It might be that, I say we, the West used to extract people from the global South. Now we extract all the resources from the global South. It may have used to have been Western governments that were extracting the people from the global South. So now you have Western governments and Western corporations and companies that extract the resources from the global South. We still act like we own those countries. We still act like we own those regions. We still extract the water. We still extract everything from there to, again, relentlessly drive for profit. And, that justice is incredibly important moving forward. We need to really understand that human cost of our consumerism, and our capitalist structure and the way that we have lived for the last however long, for a very long time. And I think sometimes that human cost is lost when we talk about climate change and the climate crisis. We often speak about very, very important issues, but the damage to the Amazon, the loss of biodiversity, the loss of our natural environment around us crumbling. But I'm not sure it's been really hammered home, especially to the general public, about the human cost that's happening right now. I've just come from a very, very inspiring and and somewhat harrowing talk around reformative justice and speaking to somebody who lives and campaigns, sort of in the Himalayas, and speaking about 65 people from their community who were lost within the last month due to the extreme flooding there that's happening right now. That is a result of the actions we are taking within our communities up here in the global north. But that human cost is often so lost in the communications around climate justice. So for me, that is real. And there's so many reasons why it's so important that we use our resources more diligently, but the justice element of it is to me the most important.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very humbling. Doing some of the interviews I've been doing recently, and I interviewed an amazing girl from St. Vincent and the Grenadines called Nafisa Richardson, who I met at the youth pre-COP in Milan. And I mean, what they have gone through in the last 18 months is utterly shocking. I mean, they've had a hurricane, a volcano, COVID and dengue fever, and the complete loss of income from tourism. And that is repeated again and again and again. And we have island nations going underwater imminently, and people still not acting. I mean, we've got huge low-lying countries like Bangladesh who are going to be underwater pretty shortly. And we seem incapable of acting or changing the system. Zanaji, would you like to kind of add?
Yeah, sure. I think that, you highlight something really important there, and you as well, Tyrone, that, Black, Indigenous, and people of color around the world are being disproportionately impacted by this issue. And that is why it is so important to have sustainable living, because our actions, whether we like it or not, impact someone somewhere else. And so the power that we're getting right now, and I don't know the energy system here, but likely is coming from fossil fuels. And that's going into the air in some community somewhere here and harming someone's air. And think about coal. Coal in the US is still being used, and that's harming waterways. And I can appreciate the energy that I'm able to use, but it's impacting someone. And think about that with pipelines. We right now are allowing the Line 3 pipeline in the US to continue, which is bringing tar sands oil from Canada. And Indigenous people are fighting against it. They're fighting for wild rice that is endemic to that region. It only exists in that one place in the world, and is sacred to those people. It is their traditional homelands, and they're fighting for it. And yet we continue to favor profit over sustainability. So our actions around energy use and consumption affect people everywhere. And this is a global impact.
Yes, it is. And I interviewed a wonderful Indigenous lady from Guatemala today. And I asked her about, the climate, and she's like, and humanity. And she was like, but they're linked, and you have to address humanity first. And I think we all need to take a kind of good look at, what we're doing to others. Joe, would you like to add to that?
So I think if we all look at the world and think, how do we want to love all of the children in the world, irrespective of whether it's an insect, it's a human, or it's a plant? And what is it that we're doing to make sure that we love the children of the world? Which might seem a little bit cheesy, but if you change your frame of reference and think about it from that perspective, one of the big things that really frustrates me is that human beings just want to exterminate things. It's like, kill the spiders, kill the flies. I mean, I know this may seem like such a small thing, but I'm a beekeeper myself. And I just don't understand why we're obsessed with exterminating things. So if we can't even look after the smallest things on Earth, how are we ever going to look after, human beings that are from across the world that we don't see on a daily basis? So I think it's just celebrating biodiversity as an overall wholesome aspect and understanding how connected we are as human beings, and we are literally killing ourselves.
Yes, we are, and the plastic bottle that we throw away today can end up in landfill in Mozambique, along with the dirty nappy and everything else. And a country like Mozambique is ill-equipped to deal with their own waste, let alone all of ours. And this is really what we need to think about. What is the impact that I'm making on other people, and really seeing that impact. So So Naji, what are you currently doing to address this?
Yeah, so lots of different things. So in the US, we have the climate bill that is moving through our Congress right now. I've been meeting with members of Congress and their staff to push that forward, to call on the US government to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. And that's one of our #1 priorities for 0 Hour coming to COP as well, is eliminating fossil fuel subsidies. And if you don't know what those are, it's essentially funds given by governments to help fossil fuel industry function. And in the US, it goes towards the cost of drilling. It actually helps clean up oil spills caused by their own pipelines. So our tax dollars pay for their spills that are also hurting us. And billions of dollars, $500 billion actually globally, in fossil fuel subsidies happen every year. And so we're calling on global governments and the US to end that practice, because we can't possibly transition to renewable energy and to a sustainable society without actually ending national funding for fossil fuels.
I mean, it's so fucked up. Sorry.
It is.
But it is. You know, I mean, ultimately, these guys are destroying the planet. They are making huge profits, and they're getting government subsidies, and that's our money. And we can stop that. That's our money. Josephine.
I'm doing nowhere near as anything impressive as that. I sort of have come, I suppose, from the side of the consumer. So I was even when I stopped sort of fast fashion, I went to secondhand clothing and I overconsumed there. And it was sort of like, oh, this is a more ethical way to shop, and therefore I'm going to shop loads. And I think one thing that I'm trying to do with Sojo is really rethink the actual need for shopping, and it's not as significant. But actually, I would say that one thing that we're now doing, kind of like Joe was saying in terms of assimilation from within or trying to change from within, is we're really trying to work with brands to get them to offer free repairs to all their customers so that they're accessing their millions of customers. And we've signed a really big brand, and it's sort of launching in the next sort of week. I don't know if you guys know Gani, but they're going to sort of be giving free repairs to all their customers, which I'm just so excited by, because when it's free, I mean, then it's so accessible and it's so circular, and they're not making money from it, and it's not about profit. It's purely about circularity, and getting them to get on board with that and changing that in the industry and getting other brands to become like the Patagonias of the world is something that really excites me. And I'm glad that, you know, with Sojo we're trying to facilitate that, and I think that hopefully it can have a good impact, because when you get people repairing, I think you're then changing a bit of a psyche of, you know, if it breaks, it doesn't just go in the bin, and it allows you to have circularity in other parts of your life as well. So yeah, that's what
and I mean, consider this. I mean, my much mended pair of jeans used 1,800 gallons of water in their making. I mean, that is just shocking when you really think about it. So when you actually kind of buy clothes, I mean, Livia Firth, who produced the True Cost, always taught me that you should always look at something and really consider before buying, will I wear this 30 times or not? And it's a brilliant rule. I use it every single time I buy something, whether that's vintage or sometimes new. But, you know, really, I mean, that's just a huge amount of water for a pair of jeans. And that doesn't even, like, counter the dyes and the zips and, you know, I mean, these are ethically made jeans, but...
But it doesn't need to be accounted for. That's what the problem is. So on a balance sheet for a business, that doesn't need to be accounted for. It's madness. Sorry.
No, it's utter madness. And Joe, you dive in there. What are you doing at Beauty Kitchen about this?
So it's about reusable packaging. That's what we are focusing in on, yeah? So we're not trying to get people to recycle more. We're not trying to get people to use recycled plastics. We're focusing in over here on different materials that can be reused. So that's glass, stainless steel, and aluminium. We've got the data to prove that the difference that makes from a greenhouse gas emission. Is it a perfect system? No. Is it better than plastic? Yes. So it's nudging, but it's about getting. So Unilever are the 3rd largest personal care business in the world. In fact, I think they're the 2nd largest food business in the world. I don't know how many billions pieces of packaging that they use every year, but if we can get them to change to reusable packaging, what a difference that would make. So for me, it's about reuse.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, we need to reuse things, and also I would encourage everyone to read their labels as well. I mean, there are, you know, if you reuse, you know that it's gone back into a system. You know, I've heard terrible stories of you know, recyclable plastic this beauty product is made with recyclable plastic. Well, I mean, all plastic is recyclable, basically. And the fact is that the demand for recyclable plastic is so huge that you've actually got plastic bottle factories making plastic bottles that never have water put in them and are then crushed to make recycled and recyclable bottles. I mean, the system is really fucked up. And the fact is that the recycling system is totally broken. I think something like 7% of all the plastic that we diligently put into our recycling bags gets recycled. The rest gets shipped overseas to someone in Mozambique or Burma. And guess what? We get to tick here a recycled box. I mean, that is what's happening. That's, that is deemed recycled. I mean, that is not recycled. That is somebody else's problem, I call it. Tyrone, what are you doing about it?
So here's my 5-point plan. No, but that was a really good segue, because that really leads to about how there's only so much you can really put the burden on the consumer in these kind of situations. We've been told for the last couple of decades now, recycle, recycle, recycle. It's going to solve it. It's going to be all the the green solutions. And we can see right there that often the things that we do recycle have the same problem with our local recycling here in Hackney, down in Hackney. That is not actually generally being recycled. So that's the one most basic thing that consumers are told to do, and even then the system is letting them down. Then how much can we keep telling consumers that it's their change in habits which is going to solve the climate crisis? Because that's absolutely not the case. So what I try to do is use my voice and use my platform to spread that, essentially, and to try and give others a voice and a platform as well. Because I think it's really, really important that whilst we do and we can all change our habits, and I try and live as eco-conscious a life as possible, that's not going to change everything, and the system has to change. So we need to bring people's voices forward, platform more people, and I want to do that as much as I can, and I'd encourage anyone else to do that as well. Give people a platform, give people a voice, but don't tell people that it's just their choice. I didn't mean to rhyme, sorry. That sounded so cliche there with a little rhyme, but that's absolutely it.
No, and I think we need to let people know. I mean, when you have this information, once you know it, you can't unknow it, right? It's like, oh God, I mean, and we have to share that. We really have to share that with other people, and watch movies like The True Cost with our friend the Shopaholic, and who's kind of Instagramming you out for every other day. We actually have to sit them down very nicely and go, do you want to watch this movie with me? I'll bring the popcorn, and and break them in that sense. So, I have a podcast called Start Somewhere. So, I'm going to ask each of you now, what's your advice to our audience here in the studio, but also to the many people tuning in from around the world? Hello, world out there. Lovely to see you. So what advice are you going to give to them about how can they really start somewhere? What is the one or two or three, I'm going to allow you to have more than one, kind of tangible actions that people can do now, starting now, to actually really, really contribute to halting climate change and really changing the system? Sanerji.
Yeah, so a few things, and I will do all three. But I think first major thing, if you are old enough to vote, then vote. I think that our political systems are a massive way to affect change and bring about change in policies that impact corporations and banks and the entire system that we've been talking about this whole time. So voting, paying attention to elections, whether they're national or statewide or local, is huge. The second thing is divesting your money from fossil fuel finance. And so there are banks, well-known all around the world, that are actively investing money and continuing to expand fossil fuel production. JP Morgan Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, lots of banks all over the world. So look into where you have your own money. You can move it to a credit union. You can move it to another group. And then your money will not be going into perpetuating fossil fuels and impacting it that way. And then the third thing, which was just said, is highlighting people. And so follow activists, follow organizations, sign those petitions that they're sending, and uplift voices on the front lines of this movement. And that's huge, because storytelling is a major way to affect change as well.
Yes, it is. And I'd actually even go a bit further and say, go into politics. I mean, actually take that dive. I think a lot of, I mean, I'm going to ask Tyrone about this in a minute, but I think a lot of people don't want to go into politics because it's unpleasant, it's dirty, you know, that kind of stuff. But go into politics. If we do that, we can change the system, right? Tyrone, how would you start somewhere? How are you starting somewhere? How do we get into politics?
No, absolutely. I completely concur with that. I think sometimes politics can be, I know in the UK landscape anyway, quite an intimidating sphere to get into, and also, you know, we don't have the best voting system or electoral system in this country when it comes to general elections, and sometimes, you know, getting into politics can seem like not a waste of time, but is this going to be a way I'm going to have the most impact? But I think sometimes it's lost how much impact you can have locally to make impactful change. And local government is accessible, and I think everybody can get involved in that, whether that's voting, whether that's campaigning, whether that's just leafleting for one of your candidates that you believe is climate conscious, or standing yourself. But getting involved in local politics can be accessible. Finding youth groups in your area who are involved in local politics, but using your voice in that way, I think, is really, really important. And my tip for anyone who is involved already, you know, who is an activist, who is a campaigner, is try and infiltrate spaces where we don't usually sit. I think, you know, we can sometimes create, or I have always have a fear of creating somewhat of an echo chamber, and I've noticed that I speak to a lot of the same audiences. I'll sit on a panel with the same people, and it's great and it's very reaffirming, and I feel great afterwards. But you know, I think, is that really having that impact? And you know, sometimes in my younger days, I think, oh, I'm not going to do an event that's associated with this because you know it's not quite my morals. You know, I did a video last year in a partnership with Selfridges, who I don't agree with for many reasons around the fast fashion. However, I then, you know, my wise years, I thought, well, that's a platform and a way to have a window to a completely different audience. And I think it's very important to utilize that voice. Similarly, you know, we are here on the stage talking about rapid overconsumption. We're talking about corporations extracting resources from the global south. And I'm aware I've got a Nestle symbol right next to my head. You know, so 5-6 years ago, I probably would have just said, well, I'm not going to do this event because that's ridiculous. Whereas now, if it's still going to allow me to have my voice, use my voice, and try and have that little bit of difference, then I'll allow myself to do that. So, yeah, infiltrate spaces is one of my key bits of advice.
I think that's a terrific piece of advice, and certainly over the years I've been doing this, I've found positive engagement, stick and carrot work quite well. And you know that yes, if you can't go in through the defensive you're wrong angle, then kind of, you know, through the back door is quite good. And those corporations and governments are made out of people. I mean, some of them just don't get it. I mean, I've had meetings, you know, when we started A Plastic Planet with supermarket kind of sustainability people who would go, oh God, yeah, it's terrible, the amount of plastic, you know, I throw out on a weekly basis. And I was just staggered. It's like, you're in the business of making this stuff. I mean, you sell it, like, and they hadn't kind of made that connection. And I think that sometimes, you know, people just go to work and they put their work hat on, and they're also part of a system. Like, they've always done it. The fashion industry works like that. You know, the food industry works like that. And we've got to inspire them into thinking differently, and do that in a kind of resolute, like, way. You know, not give an inch, but kind of like, well, you know, it's time to change. And you know, you really need to move, and sometimes they do find that pretty helpful. And Joe, I mean, that's what you're doing with kind of Unilever and the companies you're working on. So, you know, what's your, you know, top tips for starting somewhere, and how are you managing that?
So I think the first thing is know what you can contribute. Yeah, so it can be rather overwhelming as well to think, you know, how do I make these choices? I've got a young family, for instance, or I've got a house that I need to run, or I've got work that I need to go to. And there's so many competing priorities out there. It doesn't matter what age you are or where you live. And I think it's just understanding what your contribution can be. And you might think it's something small, but it probably isn't. And the fact that you're thinking about contribution in the first place, whether that's through local government, or whether that's through getting your mum to have a reusable shopping bag, whatever that contribution can be, it's starting small so that it's manageable, and then get an interest. So find out what your interest is. Yeah, so I'm a failed chemist. Yeah, so I have a real interest and curiosity about how things, particularly material science, how things are put together. So and that's why reusable material really works for me. I can be a bit nerdy about that. So everybody has their own little nerdiness. So find out, what that is, and use that as part of your contribution. The other thing is, I think it's also about giving, we've talked about this just recently, about giving other people the confidence to point things out. So if you think something is wrong, but you maybe just don't feel you've got the confidence to point it out, find others that will give you that confidence, or you give someone else that confidence. And it happened to me today. So I was on another panel discussion here in Glasgow, and we were talking about circular economy and all the great things that we're doing and how wonderful we are. And I was the only woman on the two panels. Yeah, and I said to the guys earlier on, I was sitting in my head, and you can tell I'm a pretty confident person. Yeah, I can speak my mind. And I was sitting there going through in my head, should I actually say something here? So I was even questioning myself. Now, I did say it, but it would have been wonderful if one of the guys, white guys, had said, do you know what, actually, we're not even that diverse here. At least it's then recognising it. And I think there's something about confidence, do you know what I mean, that then joins people together. And then you have to be prepared to say no. So we have been asked so we're working at the moment with a lot of the big main plastic polluters as per the Greenpeace report. We're under NDA, but we've been asked if we can do reusable packaging for them exclusive. Yeah, that is a big commercial piece for our business. It could be huge. And we've said no, because it's just not the right thing to do. So again, you've got to know where your own ethics are, and whatever, whether you're a student, whether you're business, what are your ethics, and really listen to your own heart, because your instinct is really right. Okay, some people might think you're mad, but that's actually okay, because generally you've just not found your tribe, so to speak. So really listen to your heart.
Yeah, and well done for so bravely saying that, Jo. Good for you.
We didn't say no as in no. We found a very diplomatic way of saying it. Yeah, I wasn't in the room at the time. I'm just not very good at diplomacy.
So, Josephine.
Yeah, I think I'll come more from sort of a fashion and consumption standpoint, in the sense of the few things that have really helped me. And I think when we're talking about overconsumption, it kind of does start, it's systematic, but it does start with the individual and them changing the way that they have habits around consuming. And if you're conscious about it, it does really help to have sort of tips around doing that. And for me, one thing that helped, you kind of mentioned it earlier, Sara, but I heard someone say that you should think about a fashion purchase like a tattoo, like you have to love it for the rest of your life. So really thinking about the commitment, like, is this something that that's really beyond the 30 wears? Yes. And then also stopping your buying habits from being impulsive by giving yourself like a month to think about it. And that's so long when you think about an item that you want to buy. But if you can't wait a month, then there's something really wrong. So stopping that impulse and actually taking time. And then the third thing I would say as well that's really helped is that you do get to that point where you don't like the clothes that you have in your wardrobe, and you're like, I don't like this, and I want something new. And Orsola De Castro, the founder of Fashion Revolution, said you should hide your clothes. And that is something that's really helped. Even from like winter to summer, getting out my summer clothes, and I completely forgotten about them because I can't even see them. If they're in a bag at the back of under your bed at the back of the wall, imagine doing that with clothes that you put away for a couple of years, and then you get them out and you bought them for a reason. You loved each of those pieces so much when you bought them, and that's something that's really helped me as well. Is if I'm feeling negative about a piece of clothing, I do not put it in a big bag and take it to the charity shop and dump it there, and it's like goodbye forever. It's like you bought that for a reason, hide it, and you will love it again, and that way you can keep loving it for sort of decades. So those are my 3 tips.
That's great advice. Or maybe loan it to a friend who can wear it for a while as well. That's always a good way to do it as well. And Jo, if people want to find out more about Beauty Kitchen and yourself, how do they find out more? How do they join the Beauty Kitchen kind of revolution?
So it's really easy. You just look up Beauty Kitchen. Also, I wanted to highlight, which Sara's a part of, is, and I suppose this echoes what everyone's been saying, I'm a bit nerdy about this stuff, so it's about finding other people that just aren't interested at all. So recently, the Sustainable Beauty Coalition was set up really to get some consistency within the beauty industry around sustainability. And, you know, the beauty industry is just not known for sustainability. When we talk about recycling, the recycling rates are so much lower with personal care products than they are with any other products that it's really shocking.
Oh my God, I have to add, the bathroom bin is the least recycled place in your household. Please, if there's one thing that you all do tonight, even though the recycling rates are so low, look at your bathroom bin.
And if it's still sealed, give it to somebody, because you might have, you know, products that you've not even opened or, you know, used. Just pass them on to somebody that will use them.
Yeah, and on that point, there's a marvelous organisation called Beauty Banks, who you can send your beauty products to, and they redistribute them to people who really need them. So please look them up. Tyrone.
So, yeah, I mean, found out more of the work that we're doing. So, I guess with the different hats, but we have a social change agency. We do a lot of work with different organisations, different local community groups. But, you know, I'm here also with the Federation of Young European Greens, representing the Young Green Party as well. So, you know, follow those groups, find out about the different work that we're doing, and both politically and just through general activism. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it. You can try and find me on the socials as well, and you'll see different things that I'm up to as well. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's the main thing. I guess just one quick parting message is that, just reminding me, but you're going to hear a lot of things we have already, really, from a lot of corporations and big companies now about what are you doing, you know, to reduce your consumption? What are you doing? What are you doing? So just let's reverse the question back to them. Is like, what are they doing? You know, everyone's going to really try and push this on you at the moment. So just don't let them.
And I think that's a really good point you make, Tyrone, because, you know, it's all about, well, you know, we have to do the recycling. We have to take often the stuff back. You know, it's down to the consumer to do it. And actually, we need to push. I mean, they're the companies that made it and flogged it to us. So they actually have to. It's their mess. You know, they need to take responsibility for the products that they make and the life cycle, and every product that they make, they need to actually think, you know, what is its life cycle? How does it live? And how does it die? I mean, and literally, you know, make that completely regenerative, you know, and not leave anything. You know, and that's why, I mean, I think sustainability isn't enough. We need regeneration. We need products that actually do something, add something to the world, to humanity, to the planet. And sustainable, I think, is I mean, it's no longer enough. Josephine.
Yes, you can download Sojo, the app. We're only available in London at the moment in terms of servicing area, but hoping to grow. And also, we have a sustainable fashion community on Instagram called under @Sojo app. So if you want to sort of get sustainable fashion facts on the daily to help you on that journey, because it's all like a step-by-step thing, then definitely find us on there.
Thank you. And Zanaji.
Yeah. So I'm on social media. You can follow me at Naji Artist, which is my nickname, and my full name is Zanaji Artist on Twitter. You can also follow 0 Hour at This Is 0 Hour. You can visit our website, thisis0hour.org, to hear all about what we're doing. And Arctic Angels, who I'm also working with Global Choices, are on social media, and you can visit their website as well. And then I'll also shout out another organization called Polluters Out, and they are another youth-led organization working to get polluters out of COP. And so they've been working on this for a few years now to get the influence of oil and gas out of sponsorships at the UN, and involvement in the negotiations as delegates. So definitely follow them as well, particularly because we're all here because of this, and it's really important to get polluters out of the negotiations as well.
Thank you so much. And I mean, what an amazing panel. I mean, they're each breathtaking in their passion and inspiration, and I'm so humbled to be with them all today. So please give them a huge round of applause, and thank you very much. Yes. And I was going to open this up to the floor, if anyone's got any questions for our panelists.
I don't have a question to the panelists, actually, but for the moderator, because I still cannot overlook this Nestlé logo. So I was wondering, as this is a talk about overconsumption and by one young world, and I don't know a lot about this organization, though I was wondering, why do you take money from this company, and how do you connect this with the message that you're conveying in this talk?
Okay, well, first off, I'm a guest, so I'm not part of the organisation. But I think that that's a very good question, and I think that one would hope that by actually bringing them on board, that they would have a change program and would be looking to do things. I don't work with Nestlé. I don't know enough about them to really comment. But I think this is where, in forums like this, we hold their butts to the fire and actually say, okay, you want to do this, fine, but these are the things you need to do and address, and really, really kind of don't mess around about it, and actually say, look, this is what you're doing. This is what your social media feeds are doing. This is what young people really think about you. I mean, it's quite amazing, because most of these companies exist in their own little echo chamber. And they're not necessarily bad people. They're not out to necessarily destroy the planet, but they don't actually know necessarily what they're doing. And we actually have to kind of point that out and tell them, and also show them the solutions, right? And really kind of go, this is not okay. You have to change. We will not buy your products unless you change. And, this is really where we're talking about the purpose of the pocket. And, really use your pocket. Your pocket is, each of us, you may not think you have a lot of money or whatever, but if you choicefully buy brands that are doing good things, these guys have to change. They're all chasing the consumer dollar in this capitalist model that we're talking about. And you will force them to change. So, please do use the power that you have, which is huge, and your voice to actually get these companies to change. Would you like to add something?
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I think that's brilliantly said. That we talked earlier about the influence of corporations and finance on elected officials and how much influence money has on that. And each of us also has that influence over companies. And so we make a decision every time we go to the cash register to decide what we want to buy. And so that can influence a lot.
I think we have another question down here.
Thanks a lot. Amazing panel, amazing points. Just speaking on that point, do you find that perhaps there's too much emphasis on people boycotting companies but not letting companies know? If you, for example, go, okay, I don't want to shop in Tesco anymore because of plastic or because of this or because of that. If you take your money away from Tesco and go and start shopping, Abel and Cole, Riverford, Oddbox, whatever, the small shop down the road, Tesco won't know why you've moved. And when they look at their figures at the end of the day, they might go, we didn't advertise enough, or maybe we didn't put enough packaging on. It's very, very important for people to actually let companies know. Perhaps more important than actually moving your money is just telling them that you're moving your money or you're not buying from them. But you finding that message is getting through to people enough.
Jo, do you want to take that question?
So yeah, I think this comes back to the confidence piece. Do you know what I mean? About you either feeling confident enough to point out something that you fundamentally don't think is right. And I think we should celebrate that, and encourage that more, rather than thinking, oh, that's just somebody being a bit nerdy, that they're not shopping in Tesco anymore, I'm just going to ignore that. I think we really need to call it out more, and I think you need to face into it. And it is a hard thing to do, even if you are a confident person. But I think something does have to change. I think one of the other ways that can, which I should have maybe said earlier, is I'm a big believer in third-party verification marks. So whether that's vegan certified or B Corp certified or cradle-to-cradle certified, and again, it's not a perfect system, but at least you know that that company has gone through a series of, you know, independent audits, particularly B Corp and cradle-to-cradle, because they place just as much value on environmental, social aspects, as well as looking at the commercial viability of a business. I think seeking out those companies, because I think the retailers that are not necessarily doing justice will then sit up and listen, because you're buying products that they then want to stock. Does that make sense?
Yes, and from my point of view, they are listening. I mean, someone like Tesco's are listening. I mean, the supermarket tracking systems are
just slow.
Extraordinary. Yes, but I mean, Tesco's will argue they've partnered with the WWF and they're now, you know, doing baskets of goods. But I think they are moving slowly, you know, very slowly. But I think do call them out. You know, we've all got social media. They've all got social media managers. You know, call them out. And really do kind of say, I am not going to shop with you. You need to change my range. You know, you need to do this. You need to do that, and be vocal about it, because they will listen. Sorry, I think you had a follow-up question.
It was only a quick point in calling it out. Social media obviously really good because other people see it, but if you write a handwritten card or a little letter, address it to the CEO, and it's handwritten, the only people that can open that is the CEO himself or herself or the CEO's PA. And you make it personal, and it's almost that, like, the costly signaling demonstrates that people care, and there's a heuristic, you know, if they know that someone's actually gone to the trouble of just getting an envelope and a card and a stamp and putting it in the post office, in the post.
That's a really,
it signals that a lot more people probably didn't do that but care.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I know from the companies that I've worked with, many of the CEOs have actually changed a whole company's sustainability strategy based on a conversation with their son or daughter. For instance, L'Oreal. The CEO of L'Oreal was told by his teenage daughter that she would never work for his company, that her friends thought it sucked, and she basically was ashamed of her dad. That is probably the single most effective thing that anyone can do, because really, you know, you're basically saying to your parent who wants you to be proud that you're not. And that, I think, is the fastest way to achieve change. So any of you with important parents who are well, any parent actually, you know, you need to tell them, because again, they don't necessarily know. They were born in this system. You know, they are part of it. And they don't know necessarily how to do things differently. Would anyone else like to take that question?
Yeah, I just wanted to really agree with the point around the boycott and just the impact it has if it's not part of a wider movement. I think that's what's always really, really important. You know, but I think boycotts can be really effective, you know, and there's, you know, certain things that I boycott. But again, if I just boycott them myself and I don't tell anybody about it, then it's just an action for myself, you know, and that's where we come around to these individual things that we can do to try and solve the climate crisis. And you know, if we're just going to boycott something on an individual basis, that might make us feel a little bit better, but is that affecting the wider climate crisis? And that's why it's always really great to try and make that embedded within a movement, or at least try and, yeah, utilize and use that voice. Because as I said before, you know, what's these main things that we can do is about using your voice, you know, and I think that's really the most important thing. Yes, consumer habits do drive change within corporations, but you know, again, if I boycott one company now and there's been no word about it, why, then that's just a loss in sales, you know. And maybe eventually through a lot of meetings and a lot of, you know, figuring out what, this is maybe why we lost that piece of business. But if you just tell them straight away, this is why you lost that piece of business, and these are the people that are with me, you know. And I know it's easier said than done, but it's collective voice and collective action, you know. We outweigh them, we outnumber them, and we are powerful as people, not just as consumers, as people, as citizens, as a community. So it's about realizing that community again and realizing we are part of a movement, therefore we don't have to take these actions in isolation. So.
Thank you, Tyrone. Yeah. Any other questions from the floor? I think not. Thank you very much for hosting us to Extreme and One Young World. Thank you for everyone at home who are listening to us, and thank you so much to our wonderful audience, and I hope that we've inspired you to take some action. Thank you to my amazing panellists. Bless you for being here.
Thank you.